Chapter 3, Utopian Economics, Sections 5 through 8, of A Modern Utopia. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. A Modern Utopia, by H. G. Wells. Chapter 3, Utopian Economics, Sections 5 through 8. Section 5. Within this scheme, which makes the state the source of all energy, and the final legatee, what will be the nature of the property a man may own? Under modern conditions, indeed, under any conditions, a man without some negotiable property is a man without freedom, and the extent of his property is very largely the measure of his freedom. Without any property, without even shelter or food, a man has no choice but to set about getting these things. He is in servitude to his needs, until he has secured property to satisfy them. But with a certain small property a man is free to do many things, to take a fortnight's holiday when he chooses, for example, and to try this new departure from his work or that. With so much more he may take a year of freedom and go to the ends of the earth. With so much more he may obtain elaborate apparatus and try curious novelties, build himself houses and make gardens, establish businesses, and make experiments at large. Very speedily, under terrestrial conditions, the property of a man may reach such proportions that his freedom oppresses the freedom of others. Here, again, is a quantitative question, an adjustment of conflicting freedoms, a quantitative question that too many people insist on making a qualitative one. The object sought in the code of property laws that one would find in operation in Utopia would be the same object that pervades the whole Utopian organization, namely, a universal maximum of individual freedom. Whatever far-reaching movements the state or great rich men or private corporations may make, the starvation by any complication of employment, the unwilling deportation, the destruction of alternatives to servile submissions must not ensue. Beyond such qualifications, the object of modern Utopian statesmanship will be to secure to a man the freedom given by all his legitimate property, that is to say, by all the values his toil or skill or foresight and courage have brought into being. Whatever he has justly made he has a right to keep. That is obvious enough. But he will also have a right to sell and exchange. And so this question of what may be property takes really the form of what may a man buy in Utopia. A modern Utopian most assuredly must have a practically unqualified property in all those things that become, as it were by possession, extensions and expressions of his personality. His clothing, his jewels, the tools of his employment, his books, the objects of art he may have bought or made, his personal weapons, if Utopia have need of such things, insignia, and so forth. All such things that he has bought with his money or acquired, provided he is not a professional or habitual dealer in such property, will be inalienably his to give or lend or keep, free even from taxation. So intimate is this sort of property that I have no doubt Utopia will give a man posthumous rights over it, will permit him to assign it to a successor with at the utmost the payment of a small redemption. A horse, perhaps, in certain districts, or a bicycle, or any such mechanical conveyance personally used, the Utopians might find it well to rank with these possessions. No doubt, too, a house and privacy owned and occupied by a man, and even a man's own household furniture, might be held to stand as high or almost as high in the property scale, might be taxed as lightly and transferred under only a slightly heavier redemption, provided he had not let these things on hire, or otherwise alienated them from his intimate self. A thoroughgoing, democratic socialist will no doubt be inclined at first to object that if the Utopians make these things a specially free sort of property in this way, men would spend much more upon them than they would otherwise do. But indeed that will be an excellent thing. We are too much affected by the needy atmosphere of our mismanaged world. In Utopia, no one will have to hunger because some love to make and have made and own and cherish beautiful things. To give this much of property to individuals will tend to make clothing, ornamentation, implements, books, and all the arts finer and more beautiful, because by buying such things a man will secure something inalienable, save in the case of bankruptcy, for himself and for those who belong to him. Moreover, a man may in his lifetime set aside sums to ensure special advantages of education and care for the immature children of himself and others, and in this manner also exercise a posthumous right. Footnote: But a statute of mortmain will set a distinct time limit to the continuance of such benefactions. A periodic revision of endowments is a necessary feature in any modern utopia. End footnote. For all other property, the Utopians will have a scantier respect. Even money unspent by a man, and debts to him that bear no interest, will at his death stand upon a lower level than these things. What he did not choose to gather and assimilate to himself, or assign for the special education of his children, the state will share in the lion's proportion with heir and legatee. This applies, for example, to the property that a man creates and acquires in business enterprises, which are presumably undertaken for gain, and as a means of living rather than for themselves. All new machinery, all new methods, all uncertain and variable and non-universal undertakings are no business for the state. They commence always as experiments of unascertained value, and next after the invention of money, there is no invention has so facilitated freedom and progress as the invention of the limited liability company to do this work of trial and adventure. The abuses, the necessary reforms of company law on earth are no concern of ours here and now. Suffice it that in a modern utopia such laws must be supposed to be as perfect as mortal laws can possibly be made. Caveat vendor will be a sound qualification of caveat emptor in the beautifully codified Utopian law. Whether the Utopian company will be allowed to prefer this class of share to that, or to issue debentures, whether indeed usury, that is to say, lending money at fixed rates of interest, will be permitted at all in Utopia, one may venture to doubt. But whatever the nature of the shares a man may hold, they will all be sold at his death, and whatever he has not clearly assigned for special educational purposes will, with possibly some fractional concession to near survivors, lapse to the state. The safe investment, that permanent, undying claim upon the community, is just one of those things Utopia will discourage, which indeed the developing security of civilization quite automatically discourages through the fall in the rate of interest. As we shall see at a later stage, the state will insure the children of every citizen, and those legitimately dependent upon him, against the inconvenience of his death. It will carry out all reasonable additional dispositions he may have made for them in the same event, and it will insure him against old age and infirmity. And the object of Utopian economics will be to give a man every inducement to spend his surplus money in intensifying the quality of his surroundings, either by economic adventures and experiments, which may yield either losses or large profits, or in increasing the beauty, the pleasure, the abundance, and promise of life. Besides strictly personal possessions and shares in business adventures, Utopia will no doubt permit associations of its citizens to have a property in various sorts of contracts and concessions, in leases of agricultural and other land, for example, in houses they may have built, factories and machinery they may have made, and the like. And if a citizen prefer to adventure into business single-handed, he will have all the freedoms of enterprise enjoyed by a company. In business affairs he will be a company of one, and his single share will be dealt with at his death like any other shares. So much for the second kind of property. And these two kinds of property will probably exhaust the sorts of property a Utopian may possess. The trend of modern thought is entirely against private property, in land or natural objects or products, and in Utopia these things will be the inalienable property of the world-state. Subject to the rights of free locomotion, land will be leased out to companies or individuals, but, in view of the unknown necessities of the future, never for a longer period than, let us say, 50 years. The property of a parent in his children, and of a husband in his wife, seems to be undergoing a steadily increasing qualification in the world of today, but the discussion of the Utopian state of affairs in regard to such property may be better reserved until marriage becomes our topic. Suffice it here to remark that the increasing control of a child's welfare and upbringing by the community, and the growing disposition to limit and tax inheritance are complementary aspects of the general tendency to regard the welfare and free intraplay of future generations no longer as the concern of parents and altruistic individuals, but as the predominant issue of statesmanship, and the duty and moral meaning of the world community as a whole. Section 6. From the conception of mechanical force as coming in from nature to the service of man, a conception the Utopian proposal of a coinage based on energy units would emphasize, arise profound contrasts between the modern and the classical Utopias. Except for a meagre use of water power for milling, and the wind for sailing, so meagre in the latter case that the classical world never contrived to do without the galley slave, and a certain restricted help from oxen in ploughing, and from horses in locomotion, all the energy that sustained the old-fashioned state was derived from the muscular exertion of toiling men. They ran their world by hand. Continual bodily labor was a condition of social existence. It is only with the coming of coal-burning, of abundant iron and steel, and of scientific knowledge that this condition has been changed. Today, I suppose, if it were possible to indicate in units of energy the grand total of work upon which the social fabric of the United States or England rests, it would be found that a vastly preponderating moiety is derived from non-human sources, from coal and liquid fuel, and explosives, and wind and water. There is every indication of a steady increase in this proportion of mechanical energy, in this emancipation of men from the necessity of physical labor. There appears no limit to the invasion of life by the machine. Now it is only in the last 300 years that any human being seems to have anticipated this. It stimulates the imagination to remark how entirely it was overlooked as a modifying cause in human development. Footnote: it is interesting to note how little even Bacon seems to see of this in his New Atlantis. End footnote. Plato clearly had no ideas about machines at all as a force affecting social organization. There was nothing in his world to suggest them to him. I suppose there arose no invention, no new mechanical appliance or method of the slightest social importance through all his length of years. He never thought of a state that did not rely for its force upon human muscle, just as he never thought of a state that was not primarily organized for warfare hand to hand. Political and moral inventions he saw enough of and to spare, and in that direction he still stimulates the imagination. But in regard to all material possibilities he deadens rather than stimulates. Footnote: the lost Utopia of Hippodamus provided rewards for inventors, but unless Aristotle misunderstood him, and it is certainly the fate of all Utopias to be more or less misread, the inventions contemplated were political devices. An infinitude of nonsense about the Greek mind would never have been written, if the distinctive intellectual and artistic quality of Plato's time, its extraordinarily clear definition of certain material conditions as absolutely permanent, coupled with its politico-social instability, had been borne in mind. The food of the Greek imagination was the very antithesis of our own nourishment. We are educated by our circumstances to think no revolution in appliances and economic organization incredible. Our minds play freely about the possibilities that would have struck the men of the Academy as outrageous extravagance, and it is in regard to politico-social expedients that our imaginations fail. Sparta, for all the evidence of history, is scarcely more credible to us than a motor car throbbing in the Agora would have been to Socrates. By sheer inadvertence, therefore, Plato commenced the tradition of Utopias without machinery, a tradition we find Morris still loyally following, except for certain mechanical barges and such like toys, in his News from Nowhere. There are some foreshadowings of mechanical possibilities in the New Atlantis, but it is only in the 19th century that Utopias appeared in which the fact is clearly recognized that the social fabric rests no longer upon human labor. It was, I believe, Cabet, footnote, Cabet, Voyage en Icarie, 1848, end footnote, who first, in a Utopian work, insisted upon the escape of man from irksome labors through the use of machinery. He is the great primitive of modern Utopias, and Bellamy is his American equivalent. Hitherto, either slave labor, Phaleas, footnote, Aristotle's Politics, Book 2, Chapter 8. Or at least class distinctions involving unavoidable labor in the lower class have been assumed, as Plato does, and as Bacon in the New Atlantis probably intended to do. Moore gave his Utopians bondsmen sang-froids for their most disagreeable toil. Or there is, as in Morris and the outright return to nature Utopians, a bold make-believe that all toil may be made a joy, and with that a leveling down of all society to an equal participation in labor. But, indeed, this is against all the observed behavior of mankind. It needed the Olympian unworldliness of an irresponsible rich man of the shareholding type, a Ruskin or a Morris playing at life, to imagine as much. Road-making under Mr. Ruskin's auspices was a joy at Oxford, no doubt, and a distinction, and it still remains a distinction. It proved the least contagious of practices, and Hawthorne did not find bodily toil anything more than the curse the Bible says it is, at Brook Farm. The Blithedale Experiment, and see also his Notebook. If toil is a blessing, never was blessing so effectually disguised, and the very people who tell us that hesitate to suggest more than a beautiful ease in the endless day of heaven. A certain amount of bodily or mental exercise, a considerable amount of doing things under the direction of one's free imagination, is quite another matter. Artistic production, for example, when it is at its best, when a man is freely obeying himself and not troubling to please others, is really not toil at all. It is quite a different thing digging potatoes, as boys say, for a lark, and digging them because otherwise you will starve, digging them day after day as a dull, unavoidable imperative. The essence of toil is that imperative, and the fact that the attention must cramp itself to the work in hand, that it excludes freedom, and not that it involves fatigue. So long as anything but a quasi-savage life depended upon toil, so long was it hopeless to expect mankind to do anything but struggle to confer just as much of this blessing as possible upon one another. But now that the new conditions physical science is bringing about, not only dispense with man as a source of energy, but supply the hope that all routine work may be made automatic, it is becoming conceivable that presently there may be no need for any one to toil habitually at all, that a laboring class, that is to say a class of workers without personal initiative, will become unnecessary to the world of men. The plain message physical science has for the world at large is this, that were our political and social and moral devices only as well contrived to their ends as a linotype machine, an antiseptic operating plant, or an electric tram-car, there need now at the present moment be no appreciable toil in the world, and only the smallest fraction of the pain, the fear, and the anxiety that now makes human life so doubtful in its value. There is more than enough for every one alive. Science stands, a too competent servant, behind her wrangling underbred masters, holding out resources, devices, and remedies they are too stupid to use. See that most suggestive little book, 20th Century Inventions, by Mr. George Sutherland. And on its material side, A Modern Utopia must needs present these gifts as taken, and show a world that is really abolishing the need of labor, abolishing the last base reason for any one's servitude or inferiority. Section 7. The effectual abolition of a laboring and servile class will make itself felt in every detail of the inn that will shelter us, of the bedrooms we shall occupy. You conceive my awakening to all these things on the morning after our arrival. I shall lie for a minute or so with my nose peeping over the coverlet, agreeably and gently coming awake, and with some vague nightmare of sitting at a common table with an unavoidable dustman in green and gold called Boffin. Vide William Morris's News from Nowhere. Fading out of my mind. Then I should start up. You figure my apprehensive startled inspection of my chamber. Where am I? That classic phrase recurs. Then I perceive quite clearly that I am in bed in Utopia. Utopia! The word is enough to bring any one out of bed, to the nearest window, but thence I see no more than the great mountain mass behind the inn, a very terrestrial-looking mountain mass. I return to the contrivances about me, and make my examination as I dress, pausing garment in hand to hover over first this thing of interest and then that. The room is, of course, very clear and clean and simple, not by any means cheaply equipped, but designed to economize the labor of redding and repair just as much as is possible. It is beautifully proportioned, and rather lower than most rooms I know on earth. There is no fireplace, and I am perplexed by that until I find a thermometer beside 6 switches on the wall. Above this switchboard is a brief instruction. One switch warms the floor, which is not carpeted, but covered by a substance like soft oilcloth. One warms the mattress, which is of metal with resistance coils threaded to and fro in it, and the others warm the wall in various degrees, each directing current through a separate system of resistances. The casement does not open, but above, flush with the ceiling, a noiseless, rapid fan pumps air out of the room. The air enters by a Tobin shaft. There is a recessed dressing-room, equipped with a bath and all that is necessary to one's toilet; and the water, one remarks, is warmed, if one desires it warm, by passing it through an electrically heated spiral of tubing. A cake of soap drops out of a store machine on the turn of a handle, and when you have done with it you drop that and your soiled towels and so forth, which also are given you by machines, into a little box, through the bottom of which they drop at once and sail down a smooth shaft. A little notice tells you the price of your room, and you gather the price is doubled if you do not leave the toilette as you found it. Beside the bed, and to be lit at night by a handy switch over the pillow, is a little clock, its face flush with the wall. The room has no corners to gather dirt, wall meets floor with a gentle curve, and the apartment could be swept out effectually by a few strokes of a mechanical sweeper. The door frames and window frames are of metal, rounded and impervious to draught. You are politely requested to turn a handle at the foot of your bed before leaving the room, and forthwith the frame turns up into a vertical position, and the bedclothes hang airing. You stand at the doorway and realize that there remains not a minute's work for any one to do. Memories of the fetid disorder of many an earthly bedroom after a night's use float across your mind. And you must not imagine this dustless, spotless, sweet apartment as anything but beautiful. Its appearance is a little unfamiliar, of course, but all the muddle of dust-collecting hangings and witless ornament that cover the earthly bedroom, the valances, the curtains to check the draught from the ill-fitting wood windows, the worthless, irrelevant pictures, usually a little askew, the dusty carpets, and all the paraphernalia about the dirty, black-leaded fireplace are gone. But the faintly tinted walls are framed with just one clear-colored line, as finely placed as the member of a Greek capital. The door-handles and the lines of the panels of the door, the 2 chairs, the framework of the bed, the writing-table, have all that final simplicity, that exquisite finish of contour that is begotten of sustained artistic effort. The graciously shaped windows each frame a picture. Since they are draughtless, the window-seats are no mere mockeries, as are the window-seats of earth. And on the sill, the sole thing to need attention in the room, is one little bowl of blue alpine flowers. The same exquisite simplicity meets one downstairs. Our landlord sits down at table with us for a moment, and seeing we do not understand the electrically heated coffee-pot before us, shows us what to do. Coffee and milk we have, in the continental fashion, and some excellent rolls and butter. He is a swarthy little man, our landlord, and overnight we saw him preoccupied with other guests. But we have risen either late or early by Utopian standards, we know not which, and this morning he has us to himself. His bearing is kindly and inoffensive, but he cannot conceal the curiosity that possesses him. His eye meets ours with a mute inquiry, and then as we fall to, we catch him scrutinizing our cuffs, our garments, our boots, our faces, our table manners. He asks nothing at first, but says a word or so about our night's comfort and the day's weather, phrases that have an air of being customary. Then comes a silence that is interrogative. "Excellent coffee," I say to fill the gap. "And excellent rolls," says my botanist. Our landlord indicates his sense of our approval. A momentary diversion is caused by the entry of an elfin-tressed little girl, who stares at us half impudently, half shyly, with bright black eyes, hesitates at the botanist's clumsy smile and nod, and then goes and stands by her father and surveys us steadfastly. "You have come far?" ventures our landlord, patting his daughter's shoulder. I glance at the botanist. "Yes," I say, "we have." I expand. "We have come so far that this country of yours seems very strange indeed to us." "The mountains?" "Not only the mountains." "You came up out of the Ticino valley?" "No, not that way." "By the Oberalp?" "No." "The Furka?" "No." "Not up from the lake?" "No." He looks puzzled. "We came," I say, "from another world." He seems trying to understand. Then a thought strikes him, and he sends away his little girl with a needless message to her mother. "Ah," he says, "another world, eh?" Meaning, another world, far in the deeps of space. Then at the expression of his face one realizes that a modern Utopia will probably keep its more intelligent citizens for better work than intending. He is evidently inaccessible to the idea we think of putting before him. He stares at us a moment, and then remarks, "There's the book to sign." We find ourselves confronted with a book, a little after the fashion of the familiar hotel visitor's book of earth. He places this before us, and beside it puts pen and ink and a slab, upon which ink has been freshly smeared. "Thumb marks," says my scientific friend hastily in English. "You show me how to do it," I say as quickly. He signs first, and I look over his shoulder. He is displaying more readiness than I should have expected. The book is ruled in broad transverse lines, and has a space for a name, for a number, and a thumb mark. He puts his thumb upon the slab and makes the thumb mark first with the utmost deliberation. Meanwhile he studies the other two entries. The numbers of the previous guests above are complex muddles of letters and figures. He writes his name, then with a calm assurance writes down his number. A.M.A. 1607. 2 A.B. plus. I am wrung with momentary admiration. I follow his example, and fabricate an equally imposing signature. We think ourselves very clever. The landlord proffers finger bowls for our thumbs, and his eye goes, just a little curiously, to our entries. I decide it is advisable to pay, and go before any conversation about our formulae arises. As we emerge into the corridor, and the morning sunlight of the Utopian world, I see the landlord bending over the book. "Come on," I say. "The most tiresome thing in the world is explanations, and I perceive that if we do not get along, they will fall upon us now." I glance back to discover the landlord and a gracefully robed woman standing outside the pretty simplicity of the Utopian inn, watching us doubtfully as we recede. "Come on," I insist. Section 8. We should go towards the Schoellen gorge, and as we went, our fresh morning senses would gather together 1,000 factors for our impression of this more civilized world. A modern Utopia will have done with yapping about nationality, and so the ugly fortifications, the barracks and military defilements of the earthly vale of Urseren will be wanting. Instead, there will be a great multitude of gracious little houses clustering in college-like groups, no doubt about their common kitchens and halls, down and about the valley slopes. And there will be many more trees, and a great variety of trees. All the world will have been ransacked for winter conifers. Despite the height of the valley, there will be a double avenue along the road. This high road with its tramway would turn with us to descend the gorge, and we should hesitate upon the adventure of boarding the train. But now we should have the memory of our landlord's curious eye upon us, and we should decide at last to defer the risk of explanations such an enterprise might precipitate. We should go by the great road for a time, and note something of the difference between Utopian and terrestrial engineering. The tramway, the train road, the culverts and bridges, the Urnerloch tunnel into which the road plunges, will all be beautiful things. There is nothing in machinery, there is nothing in embankments and railways and iron bridges and engineering devices to oblige them to be ugly. Ugliness is the measure of imperfection. A thing of human making is for the most part ugly in proportion to the poverty of its constructive thought, to the failure of its producer fully to grasp the purpose of its being. Everything to which men continue to give thought and attention, which they make and remake in the same direction, and with a continuing desire to do as well as they can, grows beautiful inevitably. Things made by mankind under modern conditions are ugly, primarily because our social organization is ugly, because we live in an atmosphere of snatch and uncertainty, and do everything in an underbred, strenuous manner. This is the misfortune of machinery, and not its fault. Art, like some beautiful plant, lives on its atmosphere, and when the atmosphere is good, it will grow everywhere, and when it is bad, nowhere. If we smashed and buried every machine, every furnace, every factory in the world, and without any further change set ourselves to home industries, hand labor, spade husbandry, sheep folding, and pig minding, we should still do things in the same haste, and achieve nothing but dirtiness, inconvenience, bad air, and another gaunt and gawky reflection of our intellectual and moral disorder. We should mend nothing. But in Utopia, a man who designs a tram road will be a cultivated man, an artist craftsman. He will strive, as a good writer or a painter strives, to achieve the simplicity of perfection. He will make his girders and rails and parts as gracious as that first engineer, Nature, has made the stems of her plants and the joints and gestures of her animals. To esteem him a sort of anti-artist, to count every man who makes things with his unaided thumbs an artist, and every man who uses machinery as a brute, is merely a passing phase of human stupidity. This tram road beside us will be a triumph of design. The idea will be so unfamiliar to us that for a time it will not occur to us that it is a system of beautiful objects at all. We shall admire its ingenious adaptation to the need of a district that is buried half the year in snow, the hard bed below, curved and guttered to do its own clearing, the great arched sleeper masses raising the rails a good 2 yards above the ground, the easy, simple standards and insulators. Then it will creep in upon our minds, but, by Jove, this is designed. Indeed, the whole thing will be designed. Later on, perhaps, we may find students in an art school working in competition to design an electric tram, students who know something of modern metallurgy, and something of electrical engineering, and we shall find people as keenly critical of a signal box or an iron bridge as they are on earth of... Heavens! What are they critical about on earth? The quality and condition of a dress tie! We should make some unpatriotic comparisons with our own planet, no doubt. End of Chapter 3, Utopian Economics, Sections 5 through 8. Recording by Bill Borst.